Right. Today's notes are going to be on Phylum Cnidaria, which include things like sea anemones, corals, hydras, jellyfish, and box jellies. Our defining characteristic of this group would be the cnidocytes. So we call them cnidarians because they possess cnidocytes, which are stinging cells. All of our cnidarians are going to be carnivores. They're all going to capture and kill prey, and they do that using their tentacles and these stinging cells. So another shared characteristic, they all have radial symmetry. So if we were to take this sea anemone or this jellyfish, we could cut them up like slices of a pizza and have them all look the same. They don't have any organs, but their cells are organized into tissues, making them more complex than sponges. Now those tissues are organized into two layers. The outer layer is the epidermis. The inner layer is the gastrodermis. And in between them is a jelly-like substance called the mesoglane. Now the gastrodermis is going to line the digestive cavity called the coeloenteron. We have only one opening into that. It's a very basic or primitive digestive system, sometimes referred to as a sac-like one. So food comes in, gets digested, and comes right back out through the same opening. If we look at this diagram here, if this sea anemone were to eat something, it comes into the gastro cavity, digested, and leaves again. So on this slide, we can see our two basic types of anatomy or body structure we see with our cnidarians. We have the polyp, very common in corals and anemones, and then the medusa, which we see in our jellies. So the cnidocytes, these are going to be special for feeding and defense, because if you are able to sting things, you're less likely to be eaten on. They're going to be concentrated on the tentacles, but can be found on almost all body parts. Now, all of our cnidarians can sting, but not all of them can sting you, or it's certainly not strong enough for you to feel it. Typically speaking, the sting is only strong enough to kill or paralyze tiny things like little tiny zooplankton or small shrimp or small fish. Now, how they sting is they're going to sting with something called the nematocyst. So this is a capsule inside the nematocyte. When something brushes by this little trigger, it just needs some pressure. Then the barb is released and injects the toxin. That toxin does vary with species, and so they're only going to be used once, and our cnidarian does not have the ability, it doesn't decide when it wants to release them. It's just if it gets brushed, this barb does stick into the victim or into the prey, and it's replaced by nearby cells. So nearby cells will go through cell division. Now, if you do get stung by a jellyfish, it's recommended that you put meat tenderizer. Meat tenderizer helps to break down proteins, and this barb is a protein. So, and it has now been stuck to your skin. So by adding meat tenderizer to it, it helps to break down this protein. So now for our classes. So we saw things that they had in similar. Now we're going to look at some of the unique features for each of our classes. So the first class is the one that most people are not very familiar with, and that's the hydrozoa or the hydroids. These tend to be very small, some of them are even microscopic, and they're often mistaken for like an algae or maybe a plant because they're so bushy and feathery. Now in a hydra or hydroid, they're going to have a polyp shape to them. See the base of our polyp with the tentacles. But these polyps are going to be interconnected into one colony. sharing food between them, sharing responsibilities of defense and reproduction. Now, while most of them are small and algae-like, there are a few that are much larger and much more well-known, like the Portuguese man-o-war, shown here. This can be quite large. This is not one animal, but many animals, so it feels kind of counterintuitive. Many people are surprised by that. But the Portuguese man-o-war is a colony of animals. And this has been known to kill people, although not very often. It does have, though, a very painful sting to it. And even specimens that you find washed up on the beach, you shouldn't handle. They're still capable of stinging. And this is one very commonly found on our Texas beaches. And here's an example of some deep sea ones. So we even find these throughout the ocean, not just floating on the surface like the man-o-war, but down to our deep sea as well. Next is class Scyphozoa. These are the true jellyfish. So these are each a single organism, no longer a colony. Most are going to be bell-shaped with tentacles that they'll use for capturing their prey, so they have that Medusa body form. And they can move by pulsing their bell. Now, they don't move very quickly, and they're not very strong swimmers, so we still consider them part of the plankton, but they can move around a little bit. So some common jellyfish that you might find at the beach include the moon jelly and the cannonball jelly, or sometimes called the cabbage head jelly. These two here, similar in size, both about up to a foot across in diameter. And these two are, generally speaking, they do not have a very strong toxin, and you're not going to feel a sting if you were to interact with them. Now, I still don't recommend that you go out and try to touch one. You never know if you might have a jellyfish allergy. Just like some people are highly allergic to bees, you could be allergic to jellyfish. These two here, the lion's mane and the sea nettle, do have a much more powerful sting. This one here is the more common, but most people who are getting stung on the beach here in Texas, it's either the sting nettle or the Portuguese man-o-war, or hydrate there. And we do have some deep sea jellyfish. This one here, the Atolla, is also capable of bioluminescence, meaning that it will glow and flash these bright lights when it's being attacked. Our next class are the cubozoas, or the box jellies, and these have a couple unique features. Instead of having the nice round shape, they have a more square or box-like shape, which we can sort of see this one here from the side. Their tentacles are arranged differently as well. Instead of being evenly distributed all the way around the jelly, the tentacles are located only in the corners. So some only have 4 tentacles, like this one here. Others have bunches, but it'll be a bunch coming out there, then another cluster here, and another cluster there, 4 clusters, or groups of tentacles. These ones also have well-developed eyes. And by well-developed, I mean it has things like a pupil and an iris and a lens, similar to your eyes. And their eyes outnumber yours. They have 24 in all. So on each side, so there's 4 groups of little eyeballs. And within that group of eyeballs, there are 6 individual eyes. Now, these are able to see quite well, and they're able to control their movements in laboratory settings to maneuver around things. One of the things scientists are trying to figure out is how on earth that's possible, because they don't have a brain or any type of central nervous system, at least not that we've discovered. Now, there's only one box jelly that occasionally shows up on the Texas coast, and it's one called a sea wasp. Although sea wasp is used for a lot of box jellies, a common name that can refer to many different species. But this prefers water with very high salinity, so it tends to be more common during the summer, during periods of drought when there's been lots of evaporation to raise the salinity. Now this one does produce a painful sting, but it's not considered fatal. There are, however, other box jellies. Now these three pictured here are not found in the Gulf of Mexico. You have to go to Australia, the Philippines, the Indo-Pacific region of the world. But here are three of the most deadliest animals in the world. We've got two tiny little box jellies. This one is about 2 centimeters in size. This one is about 1. This one here gets bigger. Its tentacles can be up to 3 meters long, which means you can be 13, 14 feet away from it and still get stung. These all produce a very strong neurotoxin, which can cause paralysis, which means if you're out in the water swimming and you get stung, there's a chance that you don't make it back to the beach because you become paralyzed and can't swim anymore and then drown. These cause numerous deaths every year. Our last group are the Anthozoa. These are the anemones and the corals. So sea anemones tend to live individually, corals in a colony, and we're going to find these as a polyp form only. So our sea anemones are a solitary polyp. They live attached to rocks, shells, or other submerged objects, and they're essentially sessile. They don't really move much, although they can move some. If they're on a rock and it doesn't like where it's living, it can sort of slide around to a place with perhaps a stronger water current where more food is being brought by, where it can grab more things with its tentacles. There are some anemones that can expand and contract their bottom to dig themselves into the mud. And then we have our corals. Corals are characterized by excreting a hard exoskeleton. So here I have a piece of coral, but all this is the exoskeleton that's left over after all of the hundreds of little animals that made it died. This is what's called a hard or a stony coral. There is also soft coral like this here. This is called seawit, where it is more flexible and bendy. But the skeleton remains when the animal dies. And so that's what I have here, is I have these exoskeletons. And when it comes to building a reef, the new animals are going to grow their skeleton on top of the old ones. And so here again, here's my seawit. This was the soft coral. This one is very commonly found washed up on Texas beaches. This yellow-orange is the more common color, although there is occasionally a purple one found as well. And then here is a northern star coral. So we can see here, this one is alive. We can see all the polyps. And this is what it would look like when it's dead. We can see all the little individual cups which our coral polyp used to live. Now our corals are important, or they've got an important relationship with zooanthellae, which is one of our dinoflagellates or an algae, but it takes a lot of energy to build this exoskeleton and to collect all the calcium out of the water needed for it. And so they have zooanthellae. These help also give color or pigment to the corals. They also provide extra energy or food for the corals through photosynthesis. So there is a mutualistic relationship. Zooanthellae make the oxygen, zooanthellae make food for the polyp. Because while the polyp is collecting a little bit that's drifting by, most corals are going to get the majority of their food from their zooanthellae. The coral in return protects the zooanthellae and also provides it with some necessary nutrients. Without it, many of our reef building corals, like this one here, are not able to grow. One of the biggest threats facing corals is coral bleaching. As our oceans are getting warmer, what our corals will do when they get upset because they're hot is they eject or they lose their zooxanthellae. And when that happens, the corals end up starving and dying, leaving them looking very white. So we call that the bleaching effect. Now, not all corals are dependent on photosynthesis. There are also deep sea corals, which are able to survive. They do grow much slower, but they get all of their food from their tentacles. So we can see here the polyps on this one to grow their calcium carbonate exoskeletons. Now these reefs do tend to be much smaller, but they're able to survive without them.